Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Disappointingly for you, you have me, Andrea Marsland-Smith, who is our Chief Operating Officer and far more knowledgeable than I am about ISR Uranium and Samphire project, could not be here because she has COVID, or suspected COVID. So we decided to be safe and I will take over the presentation. But I will introduce a couple of our staff in the audience later for the highly technical questions during the break. I do make rash forward-looking statements, so I'm covered legally here in case I do. Alligator Energy as a company started life as an explorer. We are still an explorer in greenfields, brownfields, and now with a development project. And our aim is to enhance all of those aspects of our business going forward, and we'll continue to do so. In particular, as you'll see, we are now branching out into energy minerals as well. But in particular, I want to just make a comment on our work with traditional owners. We've worked with 9 traditional owner groups in Arnhem Land. We're working with 2 in the Cooper Basin on our Big Lake Uranium project. We're working with the bungalow around Samphire, and we're working with pastoralists on our projects as well. So we have a long background of working with our direct communities, and that's now enlarging into the community of Whyalla itself at the moment. And we place a huge amount of emphasis on this right from day one of any aspect of our project. These are our operations. I'll talk about Samphire, but just a quick mention of the Big Lake Uranium project over the top of the Cooper Basin. This is looking for potential uranium ISR in the Nambour Air formations over the top of that basin. We have a large footprint. Our senior geologist, Ben Williams, I'll introduce later, is here. So anyone has any questions on the status of that, happy for you to engage with Ben and have a talk. But the Nambour Air formations, of course, hold the Beverley and Honeymoon projects to the south. So we think there's a high potential for some uranium deposits there. I want to talk about the market a little, but only to mention that with the change in politics around the world, firstly in the late 20 and now the war in Ukraine this year, all of a sudden there is a race on by utilities to engage new long-term contracts. It's been a 4 or 5 or 6-fold increase in this year in the number of long-term contracts put in place. All those other points you can read at your leisure on our website or on the presentation, but that's a key aspect of our business going forward. The Samphire project, discovered by Uranium SA in about 2007 to 2008 and drilled out by them through to about 2012. It's a very interesting prospect because it had a global resource put together by Uranium SA. We've now done our own resource at a higher cutoff for uranium ISR only at 14 or 15 million pound at 670 ppm, which is a reasonable good starting grade and combination for a project. We're continuing to drill, which I'll talk about shortly. It's positioned ideally for infrastructure and workforce, but of course we've got to engage widely with a big audience in that area, both the township of Whyalla, regional pastoral communities and the Indigenous community, because it's a new uranium province in some aspects. While it's been advanced to the testing stage before, which we're doing now, it has not been advanced to production before. So we've got a lot of work to do in the area. The grades that were found by Uranium SA, we've emulated them in our drilling and to put out this first initial resource. The Samphire project itself, the main prospect at Blackbush we've been working on. You'll see the red area there is an indicated resource now, the yellow is an inferred. We're drilling again now to expand that indicated resource because we really want to have enough indicated resource to go into a scoping study schedule with a dominance of indicated. We did a lot of work in our first drilling program on comparing assay data through 14 sonic chord holes with PFN, with gamma, with spectral gamma, with measuring the size of the holes, with calipering the holes as you have to do, and a range of other measurements. So our principal geologist, Adam Huddleston's here, and he can go through any of that correlation data we found. In general, what we found in typical roll fronts like we have here, you have a 10% positive disequilibrium in the nose or in front of the nose, 10% negative behind. So we've evaluated that work and we're continuing to do so, but PFN is what we use now as our dominant data gathering tool. You'll see to the west of the area here, to the west of the the area here, we're starting to do a lot more work, and to the north, there's a lot of extensional opportunity there that we're working on. A cross-section of the typical structures there, I'll point out that the top 50 metres are barren sediments with limestones and other sands. There is a lignitic layer at the base of them, so just at this point where the sediments hit the Kanaka bed sands. The lignites don't penetrate very far. They are potentially a source of reductant for the sands below them, but there's also pyrite presence in those sands. You can see the orangey uranium layers we're finding. In many cases, these are stacked roll fronts, so we might have 3 or 4 separate sands, but even in a thicker sand of 4 metres, we could have 2 to 3 roll fronts. So it's very typical of the style of roll front you're seeing over in the Curtomona Basin as well. We have a weathered granite layer, or saprolite, depending on your preference for terminology. That is also mineralised. But the lignitic layer at the top has a lot of clays. We've excluded that from our resource. The saprolite layer, we're not sure of the permeability. It doesn't look too bad, but we've excluded it for the time being from our resource. The sediments, the Kanaka beds with the uranium bands have got an excellent porosity. The previous estimates and hydrogeological work, plus our visible core that we have, that really shows we've got something like a 5 to 6 litre per second permeability porosity. There is connectivity because some bromine tracer test work that Uranium SA did has shown that, and we're going to be emulating that again in a field trial next year. Let me just say the lignite. I'll come shortly to a bit on the extraction and extractability. In fact, I'll talk about it now because I've got a comment there. We've had ANSTO been doing work on the sonic core that we compiled up in the latter part of last year and into this year. They've been working on it during the year. We've had the initial draft report and we are waiting on the final report now. That's the official words we've put in our releases. Results have been very consistent with our expectations. So the underlying detail of that is this. We have high TDS in the groundwater, up to 50,000 salts. Nonetheless, the uranium leaches well. It did in the Uranium SA test, it's done so in our tests. We do believe we'll need to do some preconditioning to be able to extract the uranium reasonably well in the IX plant. It will extract without preconditioning, but it will cost more. So we're investigating preconditioning of groundwaters in some level to be able to work on that. So that's all I'll say on that at the moment because we're waiting our final report. But we haven't seen anything that's surprised us as of yet with what we anticipated. The latest drilling, we started drilling in October because we want to enlarge this indicated resource, as I mentioned before, and the database is currently with our independent consultant to do that resource. We found the highest grades found to date in this area. We found 2% uranium over just over a metre. We've found a lot of near 1% grades. Again, these are a bit to the west of the existing deposit, so towards this area here. And we haven't found the end of that as yet. So we'll be doing some further drilling out to the west. We've also got some consistency to the north, and we haven't yet gone back to the eastern part of Blackbush. So we're seeing a lot of consistency in the mineralisation, and we'll be drilling, according to Andrea, we'll probably be drilling most of next year. So we're doing a budget on that now. We've got good potential going forward. So Blackbush itself is really only about 10 to 15% of the known channel area there. And while Uranium SA did some drilling down to the south, they obviously found the Plumbush prospect, which is about 200 metre space drilling. We've been using a lot of reworked ground gravity data, and we're doing more accurate ground gravity ourselves now to really start to identify the location of channels more accurately. We're also finding that we need to, and Adam's the master at this, and he's learned his trade at Heathgate, of course. We need to know where the roll fronts might be moving, the widths of them, how they're banding, and that's what we're doing now. So rather than grid drilling, we're pattern drilling once we know the nose and the tail, and we're following the roll fronts. So that's gaining us mineralisation in a much faster pattern. We are engaging with the southern landowner now to be on there during the coming year for some initial ground gravity work and then drilling. And we hope to get into that in a big way. A rough 2-year schedule, and sorry if I'm rushing because I'm conscious of time at the moment. We we have a full scoping study model set up. So all spreadsheets are set up, all models are set up. We're starting to populate that now with the anticipated resource, and we'll do that more accurately once it comes in. We'll be populating with the ANSTO results. Now, our aim was to have that scoping study up by the end of the year. Realistically, it may be January, because we're enhancing the resource now. Andrea and her team have had an approvals process underway for a field retention trial and small containerised pilot plant on the site to be operating in the latter part of next year. So we've initiated the approval documentation. We're engaging on a regular basis with the government and with the federal government. The prior approval that was done by Uranium SA did not require a referral to the EPBC federal government. We're just confirming that again. But nonetheless, we'll need to go through a full process with the state government. So that's a major task, and we're engaged in that already. There's a bit of detail there on what we've got coming up in the coming year. The two key things I'll point out are the government approvals for the RL for a field recovery trial, and the commencement of planning and regulatory approvals for further exploration down to the south, and the extensional drilling at Blackbush, which will continue. I want to talk a little bit about how we work in this area and all our areas. As I said, we have pure greenfields. We have brownfields work, both at Arnhem Land with our large-scale exploration there, which took a hiatus during COVID, but we're back in train this year, and at Northern Italy in our nickel cobalt area, which is brownfields. And we have Samphire, which is an advancing project, let's call it. We've had well over 35 Indigenous employees over 8 or 9 years in Arnhem Land working directly with us. We've engaged with 9 traditional owner groups. We work with the ranger and weed control groups. We've always been engaged on the ground there with the Indigenous groups, no matter whether we're exploring or not. That's given us a lot of kudos. The NLC have done direct presentations at Indigenous conferences about how Alligator works. We're very proud of that. You won't see that presentation on our website, because one way to destroy a relationship is to abuse it. But we're very conscious of how we work there and how we will work there. And for the very first time in early 20, when we put in place a new traditional owner agreement on the Narberlek North package of tenements, where we're working now, the Indigenous groups involved and the NLC together have a one-off opportunity to become a 25% partner in that project if and when we discover an economic prospect and bring it forward for a mining agreement. So that's a bit of a first for that area. Within Samphire, when we announced the initial acquisition of the project in June 20, we immediately got on the ground with our environmental consultant to just repair some of the remaining rehab. It wasn't extensive, there's a minor amounts, but the message we wanted to give was we will work the right way with pastoralists from day one. So we worked on the ground even before we finished the acquisition to complete rehabilitation. We now rehabilitate every hole as we go. Matt Daniels, our prime consultant there, who you can see sucking up the abundance of seeds that have been in the area in the last 2 years. And we have gone to the technique of rolling all of the areas that we need to access rather than grading. We do have to do sumps. We fence some of the rehab areas. We work closely with 4 pastoralists in the area on a broader rangeland improvement opportunity. So that means we're working with them on in-kind work for different areas of what they believe they need to do on their property. And at Big Lake Uranium, we're working with the Yandrawunda group for the majority of the area we're looking at. And it's the first time they've done a uranium agreement or agreement with a uranium company. It's the first time many of them have seen a minerals agreement. They've done a lot of oil and gas. So we've gone through multiple meetings with their board and the full community to help them understand the process we would go through over 10 years if we're successful. So it's been a long path, but this is how we work, and it's the only way we'll work going forward. It will present some challenges. We're about to do open public forums in Whyalla, and we will have anti-uranium sentiment come from the town. We know that. Many of us, especially me of a certain age, have come across that many, many times. We're not afraid of it. We're happy to engage in a very wide manner. Now, to conclude, I just wanted to mention that I know that Andrea will be cringing in the background looking at this online at some of the things I've said. She would have done a better job. I wanted to just ask two of our geologists, Adam and Ben, to stand up so you can see where they are, if they're both here. There's Adam over there and Ben at the back. Please have a chat to them about anything technical that you'd like to talk about, and I will answer any questions that I can as well. Thank you very much.